So are you happy today? It kind of depends on happy in what, right? When we talk about it, we sing this song a lot, we think about it, but what is happiness? When we talk about happiness, what is happy to you is probably something a little different to other people, but we always seem to view things in what's going on by the external stimulus of the world and things that are going on around us, whether we're happy or not. And, I when I was going to work every day and clocking in and clocking out, and, one day I would clock out and I was in a really good mood. And I thought, wow, I had a good day today, and I was real happy about that. I had a great day. And then the next day, I remember one time I clocked out and I went, man, this is a terrible day. I got my car and I started thinking about it. I go, well, what's the difference? I said, if anything, today was worse. I mean, I worked in the emergency department, and we had far worse things happen to people that day. And it was like, why? I mean, yesterday we had fewer patients. It was not as hectic. And then the day that I'm saying that I had a good day and I'm going home happy was worse. So it kind of created that in me years ago, this profound thought of, what's the difference? And I figured it out. It's the measurement between my ears. It's this. You've seen that. You probably experienced it yourself, haven't you? Where you've had a day and you're like, wow, nothing can happen to you. No matter what happens is going on around you, you're in a good mood. And then one day, it doesn't matter how wonderful things are, it's a terrible day. And so it's subjective. Well, it's created. Think about it. I'm honestly, it's created within us, in other words. Now, absolutely, there are some things that they're beyond it. I'm not talking about the outliers of things that, a death in the family that you got, somebody told you that day and you go, well, I had a happy day even though my dad died, or things like that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about everyday life. Most of the times, we're in charge of it. We're responsible. We can control it, and it's hard for us to understand that. The difference is happiness in what? When you get on the scales, are you happy? I don't know about you, but I'm not. I've never met a scale that I liked. Everyone I stepped on is lying, right? I wish, and it's hilarious because, one time I'll step on them and, they're really good to me that morning, and I'm like, whew, I'm happy and I have a great day. And I know people, like Suzanne, she'll weigh once a week. And that one day that she weighs, if it's up or down, destroys the rest of the week, right? I'm fat, blah, blah, blah. Or if you lose weight, and that's why, either weigh every day or don't. That was been my attitude, is just get on the scales, deal with it. Because what you will find is you will find a trend doing this, up and down, or this. It's changing. But you can't avoid it. It's going to happen. And so do you allow that negativity or certain things to affect your happiness? And those are the worldly things. Now, we as Christians, of course, we have another opportunity that we've been blessed with, and it's dealing with our spiritual happiness when we talk about it and when we deal with that. And that seems to be a problem because, you see, I can't touch and see and taste and put on the spiritual things that God has blessed me with. And so I don't seem to value them as much as putting on a suit in the morning. I can feel this, and I can look in the mirror and go, look pretty sharp, Ron. I can see it, feel it. If I wanted to, I could taste it. But what about God's blessings? Oh, I know, we've got them, right? You're probably thinking, oh yeah, we got blessings because he said we're blessed and stuff. That's the conflict. That's one of the biggest conflicts that we battle. Because of the physical world in which we allow to shape our happiness, it really impacts our spiritual ability to be happy. They're not the same. They're not the same. The world will rage around you just like a set of bad scales, up and down and down and up and down and up and down, and it's going to continue to go on. But you see, we're more than that. I love what C.S. Lewis said. God cannot give us happiness and peace apart from himself because it's not there. There is no such thing. Honestly, the entire world is enjoying a level of happiness and peace because God exists. Just because he exists. And that's what James says. And that's what the Bible teaches, that even the unrighteous are being blessed. Because if God wasn't in charge, the world would flip off its axis. It would do all sorts of weird stuff. And everybody go, oh, no, there's the law of thermodynamics, Ron. Don't you believe in that? No, it's God. You think it's an accident that the moon is at the precise distance that it is? Do you know we've got the only moon that we know of, even in the exoplanets in this entire visible galaxy, that has a moon that is in an orbit precisely the way it is? And the proportion of the moon to the planet. There is no other one in this entire galaxy. They're not going to find one. Why? Because God created our habitat. There are many things that this entire world is being blessed with. But what do they do with it? That's the question, you see, is what? And then we come to the Sermon on the Mount. Oh, man. We read this and we're like, blessed are those, blessed are those, blessed. And we're like, okay, blessed, okay. And I know I'm sounding like a broken record. I'm kind of like, feel like I'm running down, but let's look at some of the words that we struggle with when we say, blessed are the poor. Blessed are those who are crying, they're sorrowful. That what you want? Really? Is that what you want to get from God? Because this is the way that people look at it. It's like, oh man, I got to be poor. I got to be sorrowful. Blessed are the meek. Ones that are getting beat up, run over. We look at hungry and thirsty. These are all the opposites, aren't they? And we struggle with it. Being persecuted. Woohoo, I'm blessed, Wow. Hated. And then, what does he say? Rejoice and be glad. Wow. Now put that in alignment with your worldly concept. And it doesn't match, does it? I mean, honestly, if I was to send out a survey right now and say, you really want the part of that list? Now, I'm totally misconstruing the teaching here on purpose. Because that's the way most, when I talk to people about the Sermon on the Mount and when I've taught it, that people think that somehow, in order to be blessed, I have to be poor. In order to be blessed, I have to be mournful. In order to be blessed, I have to be a punching bag to the world. In order to be blessed, I have to be hungry and thirsty. And we got it backwards. You see, what he's saying is, if you want to be a part of this kingdom, then you have to have the humility of character of these attributes. These are attributes. These are things that if a person was to look at you and say that this person is poor in spirit, it's because he is poor in the way he values himself in front of God. That when it comes to himself of value, he is poor and worthless. And God says, if you have that, you're blessed. And so we go through these, but we struggle with the reality and the hardcore definitions of these words. And I can't achieve happiness because I look at these things, these concepts sometimes, and we get them backwards. He's not saying, he's saying these are characteristic traits. One who is sorrowful about their condition because of what they have done against God. One who is sad because they know that when it comes to the value of their son, his son on a cross to mine is worthless. How could I hold myself up as anything of value when it comes to his precious, perfect son's blood? I am poor. And I'm mournful because I sin and I keep falling down. And I know I struggle with things and I just cannot seem to overcome some things. And it saddens me because I know the offense is harming my Father. Hunger. We understand that. These are things, in other words, he's saying that we must possess. He's not saying you have to be that in order to be blessed. He's saying these are blessings. So blessed is what we receive when we have these attributes. So these are the things that are blessed. So blessings, what I say, are what God gives you. When we can obtain those things, and not perfect, he doesn't say perfectly, but when we can obtain these things, we are blessed. And that opens up a whole door, right, of things in which we could go through and look at and say, well, what are you blessed with? What do you have? Happiness, on the other hand, is what you do with those blessings. See the difference? There's a big difference. And I'll give you a perfect illustration. The children of Israel. The children of Israel. Let's go back to Egypt. We know that Abraham was promised by God that he would bring forward a nation. But he told them that they were going to go into captivity for about 425 years. And then after that, then he'd bring them out and he'd bring them to Canaan and he'd give them the promised land. And then he'd make a mighty nation through his descendants. And it happened exactly the way God said. The people are enslaved. They have totally turned and become more of an Egyptian slave than they were a descendant of Abraham. Genealogically, that's all, honestly, they had a connection to with their father Abraham. They valued the system of the gods of the Egyptians, everything about them. But yet God had blessed them before. They were already blessed. But when you're a slave and you're being beaten over the head and run down and driven, it's hard, isn't it, to remind yourself, I'm blessed. And so when Moses comes, look at what he did with. So God blessed Israel. Look at some of the blessings. He gave them freedom, didn't he? He set them free. He brought them out of that bondage. Look what else he did. He destroyed their enemies. Time and time again, we see not only did he destroy the most powerful nation that existed at that time. That's like a very small minority group of people in a nation as powerful as China or America or Russia that was just a quarter of the population with no technology was able to rise up and totally devastate. You would never think that could happen. He destroyed that enemy. He destroyed enemies on his way out. He continually took care of those enemies, didn't he? He gave them food and water. They complained. Oh, we're so thirsty. God gave them water. Complained about the food. Wasn't there enough meat back in Egypt? God gave them what? God gave them food. He gave them quail. He gave them manna. He took care of their clothes. You know that they never had to go shopping for clothes? The entire 40 years. Now, can you imagine that? You never go to Walmart and get a new pair of pants for 40 years? What are you going to wear today? Well, what I was wearing 35 years ago. Man, our society couldn't handle that at all, could they? Give us a Walmart. I want a new thing. I want a new... No, God made... They didn't wear out. You see, that's the difference. How bizarre, how crazy is that? That, like this suit I bought, it's been over 10 years ago. I can already see things about it that's just falling apart. It's not as sharp as it used to be. Your clothes are the same way. Can you imagine them being as new as when you got them for 40 years? Wouldn't that be a reminder every day you got up and for 35 years you put on those clothes and they smell like they're brand new? I'm not saying how they smelled. I'm just saying if they were just as new, what would you be thinking? Where'd they come from? So they've been blessed with food, protection. When their enemies tried to rise up against them, God even took their own prophets and turned them against them, and they blessed them instead of cursing them, no matter what their enemies tried to do to them. He made them a nation, a people that was nothing but a bunch of slaves. And it just seemed that they couldn't get out of that slave state, could they? But my thought is, what did they do with them? I already started talking about it. I mean, from the time that they left Egypt, they had already been blessed. They had already been set free from the bondage of slavery from Egypt. They had already been blessed with the fulfillment of promises that were given to them. And yet, what did they do? When they stood on the shore of the Red Sea, they cried out, "What have you done? You brought us out here to die." And I don't know if you remember, but God told Moses, be quiet and watch. Look what I'm going to do. Just tell him to stop. Just stop. And he did it. And you'd think, okay, that's it. I mean, how much more of an evidence do you need than a sea divide and you go through it and you're watching the walls of water and you get on the other side and you travel for a day and you go, "We need water. Oh, what have you done? You brought us out here to die." They were blessed. They were blessed, but what did they do with the blessing? And if it wasn't water, then it was a food. "Oh, we're so tired of this. Oh my, look at this." They were blessed. What did they do with it? That's the struggle, isn't it? This is what God poured out into the prophets, was this conflict that his children had. The problem was, he had been blessing them all along, just like your children. If you've raised children, you have seen this, that they don't get it. And when they get to high school, they think, "Well, I'm going to move out. I'm going to get my own independence." I go, "Well, okay, where are you going to live? Do you know what the rent is? How are you going to pay the electricity? Do you got a deposit? By the way, how are you going to get to school?" They have no idea that the entire time, from the time we brought them home from the hospital and brought them home, that we were providing for them. They assumed every day that mommy and daddy were going to feed, clothe, protect them until they got selfish. And what they do. And that's exactly what God says to the children of Israel in Hosea. Listen to what God, this is God pouring out his heart. And he describes it, "When Israel was a child, I loved him. And out of Egypt I called my son. The more they were called, the more they went away. They kept sacrificing to Baals and burning offerings to idols. Yet it was I who taught Ephraim to walk. I took them by their arms, but they did not know that I healed them." You notice he uses those names. Those names are the same group of people. They're different concepts that he's bringing to them that they should recall. Israel was Jacob, and those children were all from the descendants, but they were all coming from Jacob. I brought them out. I set them free. I started blessing them. And what did they do? The more and more I talked to them, the further and further they went away from me. Is that what we do? Sometimes, we think about it, and they never even realize that it was them. Christians, we are blessed. We are blessed. We are set free from sin. How much does that mean to you, though? Honestly, when you leave here and go to lunch, how much is being set free from sin going to value you? Is anybody going to say, put on their resume, when they go to get a job or something, post it on Facebook? Well, maybe Facebook, but forgiven of sins. The world doesn't value it, does it? It doesn't have that, but you're blessed by that alone, because you see, by that forgiveness, we're reconciled. We are a chosen people. He also has destroyed our enemies. One of the greatest one was death itself. Now, spiritual death. Paul says there's still one more, and that's going to be the final physical sin. Sin death is done for us. We don't have to worry about that anymore. You see, before Christ came, that's all that sin was able to do and do to us, was to kill us. There was nothing that could atone and pay that price. The only thing, the best you could do, was take an animal and sacrifice it and drain it of its blood. But Paul said, and the Hebrew writer said, the blood of bulls and goats was not sufficient. It could not. That's not justice. Justice would have been ours. And so he destroyed our sinful enemy. He has put him in check. He has also put us in a condition of protection that sometimes we forget about. Now, it's a spiritual one. He's not going to put airbags around you as you spiritually live. I mean, we still have choices and things, but we have a protection that the world does not have. You can see this in the destruction of Jerusalem by the historians who were there. Whatever Jesus prophesied in Matthew chapter 24 about the destruction of Jerusalem, he described even in Luke how precise that the 3 legions of the Roman army was going to come around Jerusalem and destroy it. And he said, what? Run. When you see the army of abomination surround this place, run. Don't wait for your coat. Don't do anything. Get out, because that's the sign. Josephus, other Roman historians said there were no Christians murdered or killed in that destruction. There were over 2 million Jews killed. Non-believers, shall I say. I'm not picking on them. But honestly, those who did not accept. God has always. Even the psalmist says, I have yet to see God's children go hungry. God has provided. Now, is it the steak and the ribeye I want? No. But he takes care of us. He protects us. He has made us a nation. You see some parallels here? Us being in slavery, like the children of Israel were in slavery, bringing us through water, through blood, marking us like he marked the houses on the Passover. And now the blood of Christ passes over us, that he has delivered us out of that. He's destroyed our enemies like he's destroyed their enemies. He provides for us. Go to Matthew chapter 6. We studied that this morning. You know, how anxious we get. And he says, go out and look in nature. God is taking care of them. You don't see the birds and all the animals worrying about all those things that are going on. He said, are you not more valuable? You think my Father is going to take care of nature, that is the lore of creation, and let you suffer? No. No. He made us a nation. Let's take a look at Peter. In 1 Peter 2, 9 and 10, this is the greatest foundation of our blessings. But you are a chosen race. You're a chosen people. A royal priesthood. A king and priest. Now think about that. Let's just stop. The children of Israel, like I said, when the condition they were before Moses showed up, the only thing they had, really, they had anything in common was genealogy. That was it. But yet God had a blessing for them if they would accept it. The same thing, we have been chosen to be this race of people, this unique people that are set apart. Royal and priesthood to the Hebrew did not go together. Priest was a priest. King was a king. King cannot be priest. One of the kings tried to do that, and God struck him down with some leprosy. Could not. Do you see these are even greater than what he gave Israel? See, the average people had to go to a priest. And what did the priest do? The priest mediated for the people to God. So what are you? We're kingly, of a king's lineage because of Christ. We go into the throne room. We don't have to go to somebody. He says, we are the priest. And we go to our high priest, Jesus Christ. No one else has had that. And what is it for? To proclaim his excellencies. We do that through our spirit, through our disposition, through our joy. He says, you have been called out of that darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, now you have received mercy. So my question is, what are you doing with your blessings? And unfortunately, we're just like the Hebrews and all the people before. As soon as the people even got into Canaan and they took over the land and God had given them and distributed the tribes into their proper areas, we have a time period of the judges, if you recall, of over 350 years of cycles of every 40 years where the people would be faithful to God and then they would fall away and God would punish them and then they would cry out and repent and God would restore them and they'd follow God for a little while and what would happen? Then they would start falling away from God again. God would punish them, on and on. It's our cycle. It's what we do. Unfortunately. Fortunately, though, we have a unique relationship that is far much better. And that is because we have the blood of Christ. And that's exactly what John says in 1 John chapter 1, verse 7 through 9, when he talks about our fellowship with Christ, is the fact that we can come. We don't have to go get us a goat. We don't have to, because we have the blood of Christ that is figuratively, spiritually, constantly there available to us when we are humble and we go back to Him. And that's how we maintain our rightness before God, our righteousness. And that's what sets us, sanctifies us from all the world. That should change the way we look at it, the way we see it. And that's why the Hebrew writer, in trying to exhort these Hebrews, when the Hebrew writer wrote his book, one of the things he was challenged with was trying to convince these Jews that had become, or these Hebrews who had become Christians, not to go back to the inadequate. And so he uses the entire book to show the supremacy of Christ and all that they have gained. But what were they doing? They were going back. They wanted to go backwards. That's not where the blessings were. That's not where it's at. And so in Hebrews chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, he says, therefore, we must pay closer attention to what we have heard, lest we drift away from it. For since the message declared by angels proved to be reliable, and every transgression or disobedience received just retribution, how shall we escape if we neglect such a great salvation? We have the same problem. We struggle. We have that same opportunity. We have something else that no one else has in the world, and that's refuge. We have a place that we are in and that we can go to, and that is Jesus Christ, our Savior. And I'm going to share a couple of Psalms with you to help you see this and tie this on. It's throughout the book of Psalms. It's throughout the Bible when we look at this idea that God is trying to teach us. But let all who take refuge in you rejoice. Let them ever sing for joy and spread your protection over them, that those who love your name may exalt you in you. For you bless the righteous, O Lord, you cover them with favor as with a shield. And then Psalms 13, 5 and 6. But I have trusted in your steadfast love. My heart shall rejoice in your salvation. I will sing to the Lord because he has dealt bountiful with me. The Apostle Paul, in all the things that he went through, I just marvel. If you go to Corinthians and you read those letters, and he talks about the abuse that he's taken, and he goes through and talks about being stoned, being beaten, time and time again, going hungry, starving, thrown in jail, hated by people in the church that he had actually helped bring to God. They hated him, attacked him, threw him into jail at times, and he never gave up. And while he was sitting in when he was sitting in jail, in prison in Rome, writing to the Philippians, he was fixing to stand before the most insane emperor that Rome had ever had, and that was Nero. Madman. And yet he wrote to these people a letter that over 7 times he writes, rejoice, joy, constantly. And talks about the fact that, one of the things is, guys, I'm ready to go to my Lord. I am ready to go. And you know what? I win. If they kill me or if I die, guess what? I'm going to be with him. You see where he was able to separate the physical world and be able to have that joy even with impending execution upon him? How much can we take and still have that type of joy in our Lord? Not much, huh? And so he, in saying all the things that he said in this letter, it's one of the most encouraging letters written from a very dark place in this apostle's life. And yet he said in Philippians 4:4 what? Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. So why can't we when we look at it? Because we have to place our happiness on things that can be taken away. See, that's exactly what C.S. Lewis also said. He said, don't let your happiness depend on something you may lose. You can't lose Christ. Now, you can walk away from him, but that's different. The world can take your job. It can take your clothes. It can take your family. The world can do all sorts of things to you, but they cannot take you out of the hand of God. And that's the problem we have, is that we need to understand, place your happiness in someone like Jesus Christ who cannot be taken away from you, and he will not depart and leave you or abandon you. So I'm going to ask you, are you happy today? I want you to open up the songbook, and we're going to lead this, but I want to look at this song. If you notice, it says, first off, every one of these starts out a happy, singing, praying, living. 251. Every one of the first ones, happy, singing, praying, living. Every one of these, though, also ends the same. Because. What? Because he's taking my sins away. That alone should help us to understand that there's nothing this world can do to us that can take away that great blessing. So are you blessed? Absolutely. And we need to sometimes we need to have these discussions where we remind ourselves that no matter what rages around us, we should be the most joyful, happy people because of what we have. People should be able to look at us and see that there's something about how in the world can that person be happy in all that's going on in their life. I have seen that. I've witnessed that in Christians where I see them and I go, what in the world? You have no reason to be happy. I look at all the things that they suffered. My grandfather was one of them. I looked at his life and I just could not understand all the suffering that he went through. And yet he was one of the most happiest, joyful persons. That had an impact on me. That's what this world needs to see. Not the stuff that's going on out there. That's how they will truly see God, is through us, through our joy, our peace, because we are blessed. So when we sing this song, I want you to sing it strong. Think about it. And if there's something that we can do to help you in your relationship with him, I hope you'll take this time. Take advantage. Take an opportunity while you have the time to make it right. If you're not a Christian, you're not accomplishing the same level of happiness that we have as Christians. If we can help you in becoming a Christian, I hope that you would let us know while we stand and we sing the invitation song.
I'm happy today, oh yes, I'm happy today, in Jesus Christ. I'm happy today because he's taken all my sins away, and that's why I'm happy today. I'm singing today, oh yes, I'm singing today in Jesus Christ. I'm singing today because he's taken all my sins away, and that's why I'm singing today. I'm praying today, oh yes, I'm praying today in Jesus Christ. I'm praying today because he's taken all my sins away, and that's why I'm praying today. I'm living today, oh yes, I'm living today in Jesus Christ. I'm living today because he's taken all my sins away, and that's why I'm living today. I'm happy today, oh yes, I'm singing today in Jesus Christ. I'm praying today because he's taken all my sins away, and that's why I'm living today. Please be seated.